exactly how some readers interpreted Peanuts because they told Schulz. By 1971, Schulz was receiving as many as 100 new fan letters every day. While not all of this correspondence survived years of spring cleaning and storage, as well as a fire that claimed his first California studio in 1966, a sizable collection of letters has survived and are maintained in the Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center in Santa Rosa, California, just down the road from the artist's second studio. This book relies heavily on those collections to uncover readers' thoughts about Peanuts and how they saw it interacting with the Cold War world. This book also draws from numerous interviews, articles, speeches, private letters, and oral histories to try and understand what Schulz was thinking, both when he produced the art and when he encountered others' interpretations of his work. Finally, it investigates various public appropriations, both legal and extra-legal, of Schulz's characters and concepts to see how his work took on a cultural life far beyond the newspaper page or television screen. In many cases, the Peanuts characters became repositories for and expressions of Americans' dreams, hopes, fears, and worries. In doing so, Charlie Brown's America demonstrates that Peanuts was never simply an escapist endeavor, but regularly touched on the lived experience of socially and politically conscious Americans in the post-war era. While Peanuts readers of differing political stripes regularly wrote in to argue with Schulz about the ideas they saw in his work, what is most revealing is how often people of opposing viewpoints loved the same comic strip, but for contradictory reasons. Walt Kelly, a former Disney cartoonist who became famous in the 1950s for his political satire comic strip Pogo, has been credited by one scholar with providing in his strip a rallying point around which like-minded people could gather. Schulz provided the opposite, a rallying point around which people of diverse opinions could gather and debate. This book is not a biography, at least not one of Charles Schulz. If anything, it is a biography of Peanuts' cultural life, both in the minds of the creator and his audience, as well as in the world outside the close-knit community of fan and idol. In this way, the characters are treated as both the creation of the cartoonist and also as public symbols who took on a life of their own after leaving the printing press. While Peanuts may be the most successful example of the comic strip medium, it was deeply rooted and inseparable from the history of the art. Comic strips evolved from the raucous visual world of 1890s advertising, as newspaper moguls sought to expand their readership, and burgeoning corporations reached for a means to capture public attention and private dollars through recognizable characters. In the rapidly urbanized and industrialized 19th century United States, comic strips and illustrated advertising served as an indispensable visual guide to life in the multicultural, multilingual melting pot of American cities. In this context, the symbols of comic arts became a sort of linguistic mediary between the wide range of peoples in turn-of-the-century America. It is no coincidence, then, that comic strip characters like Buster Brown easily danced between the funny pages and mass advertising. The approval of a recognizable cultural figure could often be just the impetus a wary consumer needed to try out a new product. Integral to the success of the American comic strip was a characteristic comic scholars call polysemy. This meant that the same character or scene could be reasonably read in multiple ways by a diverse audience. The more people could relate to a comic strip, the more successful that comic strip could be in sales and marketing. Sometimes this meant using racial, ethnic, or gendered stereotypes to calcify the boundaries of American cultural citizenship. But in the most transcendent works of the comic strip medium, even these exclusionary boundaries could be bridged or dismantled to broaden the audience. Comic strips like Katzenjammer Kids, Little Nemo in Slumberland, and Crazy Cat all found ways to broaden audiences, whether through including ethnic characters in the American citizenry, traveling through universal dream worlds, or abandoning the world of direct social discourse for the allegories of anthropomorphized animals. Peanuts represents the ultimate perfection of the comic strip medium. Charles Schulz created a comic world so successfully polysemic that it attracted the largest audience in the history of the medium, counting every other American as a daily reader at its height. The comic strip sold newspapers like no other in a time of considerable consolidation and decline in the industry. There are countless stories in the Schulz archive of editors being barraged by complaints when Peanuts was accidentally left out of the final copy of local newspapers, or fans who carried a second newspaper subscription because their local paper did not carry Peanuts. But Schulz's work also sold much more than newspapers. By the 1970s, Peanuts was